In May 1984, 36-year-old Karen Gregory, a graphic artist from Albany, New York, embarked on a new chapter in her life. She had recently moved in with her boyfriend David Mackey to Gulfport, Florida, and had gotten a job as a graphic designer. In mid-May of 1984, Karen's boyfriend David was away in Rhode Island at a conference, leaving Karen alone at the house. Karen had decided to move her things from her old apartment that she shared with her friend Anita Kilpatrick to her new home with her boyfriend. On May 22, 1984, Karen collected her belongings and went back home to drop it off. Later that evening, she headed out for dinner with another friend, Nivern, arriving at Nivern's place at around 7:30 or 8 p.m. She left Nivern's home sometime after 12 a.m. This would be the last time she was seen alive. On May 23, 1984, David called Karen from Rhode Island. However, she did not pick up her phone. He called Karen's friend Anita, but she told him that she hadn't heard from her either. David figured she may have been busy with work and decided to call her the next morning before Karen leaves for work. The next morning, on May 24th, David called Karen again. However, the call went unanswered. David, now worried, called Karen's workplace, but she hadn't shown up for her work for the last 2 days. David then called his neighbor, Amy Brusler, and asked her to check up on Karen as he was unable to reach her. Amy discovered that Karen's car was in the driveway. She knocked on the side door, however, no one answered. She then tried the front door and found broken glass on the porch. Amy knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She then walked around to the back of the house and found an open bedroom window. Peering inside, she saw a horrifying sight. Karen's lifeless body covered in blood. Terrified, Amy called the police. Karen had been stabbed multiple times in the neck with defensive wounds on her hands. There was blood all over the house, windowsills, curtains, walls, and the carpet. Despite the blood-soaked surroundings, the medical examiner struggled to determine the time of death or identify specific injuries due to extensive dried blood on her. Investigators suspect the attack originated in the bedroom, continued into the hallway, and Karen may have attempted to escape to the porch before being pulled back into the house. Police found several handprints, also in dried blood, on her back and her legs, but they were not of any investigative value. Strangely, Karen was wearing a black lace teddy over her t-shirt. It looked like the killer had forced the piece of lingerie on her during the attack. Additionally, investigators discovered a dried bloody footprint in Karen's bathroom. Since Karen did not have blood on her feet, it was believed that the print likely belonged to the killer. The print showed bare feet rather than shoes, suggesting that the killer was barefoot. There was no sign of forced entry, leading authorities to consider the possibility that the killer was known to Karen. An autopsy revealed that she had been beaten, stabbed at least 13 times, and sexually assaulted. Her cause of death was a slit of throat. There were also defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting that she had fought her attacker. It was determined that she had been dead for more than a day. Police started their investigation by questioning her friends, family, and neighbors. During their questioning, several neighbors told police they had heard a scream on the early morning hours of May 23, 1984. One neighbor, Arthur, told police he was reading in bed when he heard a short, agonizing scream at 1:15 a.m. on May 23rd. Another neighbor, Martha Barkowski, who lived directly across the street, also heard the same scream, followed by what sounded like a door slamming. Residing diagonally across Karen and David's residence, Glenda Harness also heard the scream. She told police she looked out her window and saw her garage light was off. She couldn't see her partner, George Lewis, who was busy working in the garage. George returned 20 minutes later and the couple went to bed. Police also questioned her partner, George Lewis. George was a respected firefighter and the unofficial captain of the neighborhood watch in his community. He told police he had also heard a faint scream from his garage where he was working on his motorcycle. He said he had gone outside to check it out, but did not see anything. Additionally, he told the police that he had seen a man later that evening at Karen's house. The man arrived at the house in a van, knocked on Karen and David's front door. After no one answered the door, he returned to his van briefly and then placed a note on the windshield of their car. After waiting for a few more minutes inside his van, the stranger left. Intriguingly, a note was indeed discovered tucked under the wiper of David's car. The note said, "Karen and David, hello. Stopped by at 7:15 or so, but saw no sign of life. Many to do tonight, so I probably won't be back. But I have something you wanted. Will be home not too late." It was found that more than a dozen neighbors had heard the scream. However, no one called the police. Karen's boyfriend David initially became the first suspect in the case. David had been in Rhode Island at the time. He claimed to have been alone in his motel room during the murder hours. The police investigation revealed that it was possible to get a flight to Gulfport and return back to attend the conference. Although technically feasible, it appeared improbable. Furthermore, credit card records indicated he had only bought tickets for a single flight. When questioned if he thought anything was missing from the house, David said he wasn't sure as Karen was still moving in. However, he did remember she had bought a white laced teddy for herself as a birthday gift just a couple of months before the murder, but the teddy was no longer there. Police were also able to track down the man who had placed the note on David's car. His name was Peter Cumble. Peter was an acquaintance of Karen's and knew David as well. He told police he had run into Karen a week ago and that she had invited him for dinner that night with her and David. When police asked what he meant by "I have something you wanted" in his note, Peter replied that he had a cassette tape that he had borrowed. Peter claimed that he did not notice the broken glass when he visited the house, although he said that he walked across the lawn to the front door and not up the walkway, and that's why he may have missed the broken glass. When asked what he was doing during the murder hours, he claimed he went to shopping for camping equipment and then went home to bed. His roommate corroborated his alibi. Police also noticed that Peter had a scratch on one of his hands, which he attributed to his dog. He agreed to give police his fingerprints and footprints, and they allowed him to leave. But they still weren't convinced of his innocence. The investigation was stalled until December of 1984, when police got a new clue that changed the trajectory of the case. A woman came forward and told the police that she too had heard a scream that night, and that it had sounded like a long, sustained wailing. This was in direct contradiction with what they had been told by George Lewis, who claimed it was a faint scream. Moreover, this woman lived a few blocks away from Karen. It did not make sense that a woman living blocks away heard the scream, but George, who lived just across the street, heard only a faint scream. Police again brought in George for questioning and administered a polygraph test. He insisted he only heard a faint scream that led him to go outside to look. He claimed he did not see anything, so he went to bed. However, the polygraph test revealed that he had been lying. When the police questioned him further, he added a new detail, claiming that he had seen a tall man with red hair standing near a tree in Karen's front yard. Investigators couldn't understand why he hadn't mentioned the man before. George said that he did not mention him before as he was afraid, because the man knew where he lived. Even though police were skeptical of his story, They investigated the tip as George was a well-respected man and was even friends with some of the police officers. They showed George pictures of alleged suspected prowlers in the neighborhood, but he could not identify any of them as the man he supposedly seen that night. George had described the man as Caucasian, middle-aged, about 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a muscular build, red hair, and a red beard. He said he was wearing a green shirt and black pants. He asserted that he made eye contact with the man, and feeling frightened, he quickly returned to his house. Detectives, however, found George's detailed description questionable, given the distance from the garage to Karen's house and the darkness of the night. To verify George's claims, they conducted a recreation, with George standing at the end of his driveway and a police officer walking to the spot where George claimed to have seen the man. During this test, George struggled to provide specific details, unable to determine the color of the man's jacket or his hair. Detectives noticed inconsistencies in George's various accounts, and with each retelling, his story evolved. Originally, George mentioned seeing Karen on the day of the murder, then amended it to seeing her in the kitchen window doing dishes. Another time, he claimed he knew she was doing the dishes because he heard plates rattling. Detectives continued to visit George, and his stories continued to change. A woman also told police about an alleged prowler in the neighborhood. She described being watched by a man who ran away when she got closer to the window to investigate. She would later identify him as none other than George Lewis. George was again brought in for questioning and given a polygraph test. This time he admitted to hanging around a neighbor's window, but claimed he had simply been keeping an eye on things and fulfilling his duties as the neighborhood watch captain. George was also questioned about Karen's murder. He failed the polygraph test again. He altered his story once again. Now he claimed to have walked up the street after hearing the scream, encountering the man on the lawn next to Karen and David's house. According to George, he had asked the man what was wrong, and the man threatened him, warning him not to tell anyone or face consequences. Detectives, frustrated by the inconsistencies, decided to collect samples from George, including fingerprints, handprints, footprints, and hair samples, and sent them to FBI crime lab to compare them with the evidence found at the crime scene. Police also looked into his past. George had allegedly abused his previous wife and had been involved in a swingers club. His friends also spoke to the police and said that he had shown sexual interest in Karen before she had even moved in with David. He had even made a comment about wanting to have an orgy with her. In March 1986, almost 2 years after Karen's murder, the FBI crime lab informed the detectives that the footprints found in Karen's bathroom positively matched George Lewis. In an unsurprising twist, George changed his story once again, confessing to a new version of events. He now told the police that he entered Karen's house after waiting for the mysterious man to leave. He said when he walked to the house, it was dark, and when he got inside, he discovered Karen's lifeless body with her throat cut open. He panicked and ran to his house. However, police did not buy it. The police had not disclosed Karen's cause of death to the public, so it was perplexing that George was aware her throat had been slit, especially considering the darkness in the house. Even the medical examiner had struggled to identify specific injuries on Karen's body initially due to the substantial amount of blood on her. The final nail in the coffin was that police had interviewed a woman who revealed that a few months after Karen's murder, George and Glenda had separated for a few months. The woman said that she had been dating George, and on her birthday, he had given her a white laced teddy as a gift. It was the same teddy that Karen had bought but was missing from the house. George was arrested in March 1986 and charged with Karen's murder. Police believe George waited until David was out of town to rape and murder Karen. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sexual assault and received a life sentence. George died in prison in 2015. He maintained his innocence until his death at the age of 52.